So my name is Lauren Pryce. I'm the frontwoman of Monstrosa, which is an alternative rock band from Toronto, Canada. So how I feel leading a band with like all women, it's really special to me. I've been in a lot of bands like growing up and like until this age. Monstrosa has been a band for about I think 3.5 years now. So I think I don't know, there's something really special, especially when it comes to like subject matter and like writing lyrics and stuff, where I feel a certain safety with my bandmates. And I think, I mean, me and Emma, who's my lead guitarist, have been playing music together since we were like teens, so we have a really special connection there. And it really did happen by accident that all the members were women, but I don't know, there's just like a really special connection there. I do feel a pressure, especially in this genre, like doing like alternative and metal. I feel a pressure to like represent women well, because it kind of feels like people see your gender first before you even start playing. So there's definitely that aspect. It's been something that's made me feel a little alienated in certain genres, but overall it's been like, it's just a really special and rewarding experience to be the front woman of this band of these like really talented women. So I feel that the LGBTQ plus community, how it's presented and represented in the local community, there's kind of like two sides to it, because I see like a thriving queer music community in Toronto. I'm like really grateful to be a part of that community, but then it's also, it feels like it's a little bit like on the outside as well. So but overall in music, like I know that there's like tons of like amazing queer artists that are like arising and have been around forever. Like queer people have done music forever. Yeah, I feel right now in particular in pop culture, like even though queer people are present and represented, there's a lot of backlash and hatred, particularly against like trans folks. So that's kind of like how I feel about it locally, but also like on a global scale, is like if you give someone representation or visibility, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, they're being accepted. Like people talk about tolerance versus acceptance. So I feel, yeah, that we need to like keep having queer people in all like entertainment industries, like film as well. And yeah, just that they are represented in an authentic way and not like tokenized, for example. And yeah, but Toronto itself has like so many amazing queer musicians. I'm very grateful to be a part of that. Yeah, so how I feel like I express my queerness within my music, the most obvious way is like lyrically, because I think when I started Monstrosa, I made a decision to be the lead vocalist because they were the songs that I was writing, and I wanted to tell my perspective and my experience and my story, which I found difficult because I really wanted to be in a metal band and I don't do classic metal vocals. But I decided I needed to stop like holding back and like worrying about fitting into a certain genre, and just like tell my story and like write my music how it's meant to be and just let it be. Yeah, so I think just naturally, like any artist, when you create something, like it's a piece of you. So I think my queerness comes across in my lyrics, like when I'm talking about like loving women, or talking about struggling with like accepting myself, or like struggling within society. But it also comes out like, I feel like in my riffs, or like when I'm doing something like a certain like chord progression that I feel like it's queer. Like it's hard to explain, like it's just like it feels like it's a piece of me and it represents like all of me, and like so that's how my queerness kind of comes through in my music. It's as long as it's yours, like it's all parts of you. So and I feel I don't have like a producer or management or anything. I feel like that certainly makes me feel like safer in terms of being able to be my most authentic self. Like I think there's like, and you can like, lots of artists kind of struggle with this if there's like a management piece, and like, yeah, like if you have someone who's kind of like controlling what you're making and stuff. But I think it's something that I've never really thought about, because I've just done, music has been such a community thing for me. Like doing shows and like producing shows and playing shows is something so community based that I can't picture ever going into formal management or production. But rather what my band does is we collaborate with local engineers and local photographers and like all that kind of thing. And I feel, yeah, that in terms of production or any piece of that, it's very community based, and that's kind of where I hope to keep it, I think. Yeah, so for any musical influences that are also part of the LGBT plus community, I feel like most of mine are honestly local, because I'm just so like in the scene, and I feel like all of my favorite bands right now are from Toronto. Chinese Medicine is definitely an influence for me. Their frontwoman Tai has incredible performance energy, and it's something like I aspire to be. And also her guitar riffs are amazing, and I'm a big guitar person, so I'm very inspired by that. Tequila, Fura, they're also like amazing performers, and they're just good songwriters, and yeah, it's just inspiring to see like, again, a thriving community of queer musicians in Toronto, and they're in all genres too. Like I feel like, especially with like Pride Month coming about, like they're less likely to book alternative bands and rock bands, because there's like kind of an assumption that it's like, oh, it's like Pride, so people want pop music, people want like a certain like hegemonic view of what a gay celebration is supposed to be, but there's this whole other side, and like queer people are in like all genres and all art forms, so yeah, I feel like there's lots of cool alternative queer musicians, but Chinese Medicine is up there. And also shout out to Wax Twins as well. They are also a really amazing queer rock band in Toronto, so those are just a couple. I could go on. How accepting the local scene has been to me, I think, again, I feel very like connected to the queer community, specifically in music. I started organizing shows kind of because acceptance was an issue. Like I felt I just didn't fit into the bills that like local promoters were putting on. Like I felt that my genre in particular, like alternative metal, was very male dominated, and people didn't really see me as that, so that was difficult. But because of that, I feel like I've stepped up and learned all these skills, like event producing and like putting on shows, and putting on all queer lineups is something that I often do, like when my band wants to do a show. Yeah, but again, it's like, it's kind of like you find your people in your pockets and stuff, and it feels like it's like a bit of like alternative underground. It's not quite mainstream, and then there's kind of like the mainstream like bookers and promoters who like, we work with them sometimes, but it's like, it's different. Like there's something, again, like feeling connected to your community when you like do shows within your community and stuff. I now have to count my words. I gotta go. I guess community-based, alternative, queer, front person. Not particularly interesting. Yeah, I think in terms of what the industry needs to fix when it comes to representation of LGBTQ+ people, again, I kind of touched on this earlier, but I think there's a big difference between like visibility and tolerance versus acceptance, and just like and celebration even. And I think Pride Month is a good example, because often my band will be booked more during Pride Month versus other times of the year, whereas when I organize shows, I try to book queer people year round because they're talented year round and they deserve that recognition year round, as opposed to kind of being, yeah, just like not within the main sphere of what's happening in the industry. Yeah, so I feel like there's kind of two pieces. Like the first is just like that acceptance piece, because even when there is like visibility, sometimes even like if you see a queer musician online, or like Lil Nas X released like that album, and you would like go to a family dinner and people would be like talking shit about it and saying like really cruel things in your family, or you go online and see Facebook comments and they just be like really cruel. So it's like, even though you're giving this person visibility, it doesn't mean they're being accepted. So I think it's important for whichever piece it is in the industry, what you're doing, like whether it's like just videography or production, like to fully support queer people as human beings as well, because if you're supporting your art, you're supporting them as humans. And sometimes I feel that piece is missing, especially with Pride Month. People feel it's more of a tokenization as opposed to like a genuine, genuinely caring about people. Some positive aspects in the industry, me failing to repeat the question. Yeah, I feel like, for example, like Pride is a really special time of year because it does feature so much queer talent, and it is celebration. And I know that it comes with like, it's so difficult because it comes with like a bit of like pain for queer people as well as like joy, just because right now in like the general culture, like there's definitely like a rising hatred towards queer people and especially trans people. But in terms of positive, I mean, like I said, like within Toronto, because I can only really speak for the Toronto community, like there's so many amazing artists, and like they put on amazing shows all the time, and I think that like people are really starting to recognize that, and I think it's important to just keep like booking bands and supporting queer artists all year round. Yeah, I would say a song that I feel best represents my identity would be a song Monstrosa wrote called Hollow. What the song was like initially about was about internalized biphobia. So in terms of the LGBT community specifically, I'm bisexual. Yeah, and I struggled with that. I still do, unfortunately. Like it's kind of like an in-between label. You're not like gay and you're not straight. And the interesting piece, and a lot of what my band talks about, is we're obviously an all-woman band and we're queer, and also I struggle with mental health issues. So Hollow was very much kind of combining all of those topics, like womanhood and like bisexuality and like borderline personality disorder, which is like my diagnosis, and talking about like the ugly sides of it, and like, but then also flipping it on its head and being like why I'm such a like, why I feel like good about this identity. Yeah, because essentially what Hollow, the song, is about is saying like, even though I feel like biphobia or I feel like maybe like unsafe, like I'm like myself, and I think that the end of the song really celebrates that. So it's kind of like the song is like a journey of that. Yeah. So borderline personality disorder is essentially, if you do the DSM kind of diagnosis of it, it's like, it's just like really severe like issues with self, like, what's the word? Yeah, like a fragmented sense of self, struggling with things like suicidal ideation, like not knowing who you are, like self-harm, like those are the kinds of classic things. But what's interesting about the diagnosis is it's mostly only given to women. So when I was growing up and I was looking at the like prognosis and all that stuff, I was like, some of it is like, oh, like you have like impulsivity issues and like you have like sex too much, or like you do this, and it just felt like a very gendered diagnosis. So that's why like in Monstrosa I talk so much about being like literally like a monster, because I think BPD in particular is a diagnosis given to women specifically, and it's kind of like, it's almost like the crazy woman diagnosis, like, so yeah. And I think yeah, it's just been like a really interesting journey in terms of like what it was like in the medical system with it, and then what it's like being an artist with it, and what are like social perceptions of it. Yeah, and then to get back to the song Hollow, like I think it was kind of saying like, you know, like even though like I'm perceived as like a monster, like there's not, like that's not necessarily like what it is. Like I feel like BPD, people with BPD are very feeling, like they have strong emotions and they're very loving people, and I think that that's something that can be celebrated, and it shouldn't always be seen as like stigmatized as it is, especially in like medical fields. So yeah, so this question, do I think that LGBT labels are used as a gimmick sometimes by artists or labels for popularity? I would disagree in terms of artists using it as a gimmick. However, I think that, yeah, I would agree that sometimes like labels, corporations like will use it and like tokenize it to their benefit. And I think that's like an important criticism of not just the music industry, but like across all industries, that, and as it is a Pride interview, like, you know, Pride Month, that's like one of the biggest criticisms is, you know, a lot of corporations opt in because they're like, this is a way to make money. It's not because they genuinely support LGBTQ plus people. And if it was not popular in the mainstream discourse, they would like take it away and not do it right away. It's because it's trendy, so people do jump on kind of as a gimmick or as like something to like benefit them as like corporations and stuff. But I do feel that like artists, if it's part of who they are, they should be able to express it in any way. And quite frankly, as it's like, it's kind of scary to do that because again, there is like a lot of hatred, and very recently there's like been a rise in it. So I hope that, you know, some like music industry people will like stay true to like that support in the face of what's to come.
Yeah, no, I've noticed recently there's a lot of backlash against Chris from Mr. Beast. Not sure if you've heard of him. He recently came out as trans, and everybody is, I guess, trashing him for that decision.
Yeah.
Saying that he abandoned his family and all that.
Yeah, like it's terrifying. Like I think, yeah, because transphobia is rampant, and I think Canada, in a Canadian context, Canadians tend to feel that we're immune to that kind of thing. We're immune to hatred, we don't have racism here, we don't have transphobia here. But I think, and at least this is probably my strongest message to people during Pride, is that, you know, yes, we've come a long way, but like that still exists and it is here and it is on Canadian soil, and to just like stay focused and really support trans people and really support queer folks during this time. I think it's obviously there's like tons of political turmoil, and I think music is politics. Like when people say music isn't political, I don't know what they're writing. I don't know what music they're talking about, but you know, like I think people do music because they have something to say, and it's a really great way that queer people, you know, in the city and all around the world express themselves and like are showing this. And I think, yeah, I feel it's a really important part of like queer culture is music. It's like, I think that, and it's why like I'm talking about it even like in this interview, and why I want to talk about it more like on stage, is that trans people in Toronto and also like in like a lot of places in the world have historically been excluded from the LGBTQ plus community and kind of outcast, and like, oh, we're dealing with like gay marriage, we can deal with gender issues later, like that's not our cause, or like, so there's always like historically been that separation and that issue within the LGBTQ plus community, and I hope that, you know, that starts to change, because I think trans people really need our support. Like I'm a cisgender woman, so I'm not part of the trans community, but I am part of the queer community, and I feel that responsibility very strongly. But yeah, there definitely is, like that's definitely like an issue in Toronto, and still to this day, that trans folks are excluded even within queer culture, and that just kind of speaks to how ingrained transphobia is in all of us, and I think it's something that everyone needs to work on, including queer people themselves. I think how the community is represented, just in the entertainment industry in general. Again, like you see like up and coming like characters in shows, like there's more queer characters in shows, or musicians who are coming out, like Sam Smith came out as like non-binary, and it's so important to have that visibility, and I think that, I hope that it's something that really continues, but I think, and I mentioned it earlier, the painful piece is that there is still a backlash, and you do still see the hatred online and in person even, like, so I think it's definitely, it's something that's like moving in the right direction, and I hope that it continues to, but I'm also very like, I think people are very pessimistic about it right now just because of the way the politics of it are. And to bring it back specifically to like the music scene, like I feel like because like I'm in a queer woman band, like even though we kind of have like our niche, sometimes we're not given like enough credit outside of that. Like I feel like it's like, oh, we booked you for Pride because you're a queer all woman, but I'm like, you should book us all the time, because like, yeah, just to like stand up for ourselves and be like, well, we actually, our music speaks for itself, and we have this good music. And I think that goes for like the representation of LGBTQ plus people in general, is to just let them exist in spaces and be accepted and to like thrive just doing what they do, and not necessarily as like a token because of a pride campaign or anything like that. I think just having them be physically present in like all aspects of life, because they are, like trans people are everywhere, queer people are everywhere and always have been, so So Monstrosa started as a band essentially because me and my lead guitarist Emma, we met in high school, we jammed all the time. And by jammed, I mean we learned Muse songs, and it was all we played, because we were obsessed with Muse, which are a huge influence, I think, because just the way I write guitar riffs is like pretty much Muse. I do everything in drop D. Yeah, so me and Emma linked up. We're like musical soulmates, and I eventually started writing my own music, and I was like, hey, do you wanna do original music? Like, what if we like form an original band? And then sure enough, like we met Shannon and like we met Meg, and it kind of came together, and I think it's been a really special, like, because we're all bandmates, but we're also like really close friends, and I think sharing being woman and like sharing the queerness is like, it just kind of takes it to the next level. So, but yeah, that's how we formed. Me and Emma used to just play Muse all the time. Definitely Muse is huge, but there's also like a metal piece. Like I really love Lamb of God, so and in terms of vocals, I really love Evanescence. So I was just your typical like metalhead emo teenager, and I feel like that's inspired me through and through. Yeah, my message to young queer artists and young queer women, I guess just to really embrace that part of yourself, and don't feel that you're not enough of this or enough of that. Like whatever you are and whatever stage you're at in your queerness is so valid, and it always will be. And yeah, and just to know that there is a place for you in the music scene. There is a place for you in every industry. Like, you and your art are so important, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise, even if it's gonna be tough, because sometimes people are sexist. So yeah, I think that's my message, is just like stay strong, and also I have your back. The only thing I'll add is happy Pride. I hope everyone has a safe and happy Pride, and thank you for having me.